So, hey, Charlotte, just wonderful to be able to have a conversation here today about these areas of our work that we're both engaged in.
Yes, for me too. Me too.
Wonderful. So I really wanted to start with something that maybe offers a little context on you. And I'd love to ask you about, how do you come to work in the fields that you do now? What was your journey that you'd be comfortable sharing with us into that?
Gosh, it's a really long journey, so I'll try and précis it a little. I studied molecular biology. I wanted to be a research scientist, but for long story short, I actually ended up in science journalism. I thought that was the best way to go, and I used to write for broadsheets, science articles, and I then went into television and made science documentaries, popular kind of science documentaries for the BBC for many years. And in that exploration many years ago, it's when the whole kind of mind-body link was kind of fresh and new, and there was a lot of research. I made a few programs about that, and that led me into therapy. And slowly it dawned on me that actually I wanted to be a therapist. So then there was another whole journey where I continued working as well as studying as a therapist. So I was very, very busy. And so in studying as a therapist, and this was about 25 years ago, I came across focusing. And it was a friend of mine actually introduced me to it and had a little workshop at her apartment. I'd already been exposed to several different kind of modalities, and it felt like a coming home. It was like, oh, this is it. This is actually what's at the core. This is the essence of every single modality that I've been exposed to, and actually have been exposed to since, which have been many. This is the core of what's going on. This is the essence of change. And it was just like, And that was like 25 years ago. And I've been studying focusing and teaching focusing ever since. And it never ceases to surprise and amaze me. Always fresh, always new, and very life-giving. Never, never, never ever gets boring or tedious. It's always fresh and alive and wondrous, actually.
Gosh, there's a couple of directions I just feel called to kind of explore with you. I guess the first one I'd like to ask about in relation to that is, it's built out of where you said, well, there was a small meeting, with built around focusing, or we're working with focusing. And it seems to me that's something that's happened with focusing in a sense. It's astonishing to me that there's this incredible piece of work that is at the core of things, as you said, and yet somehow it's kind of gathering dust on a shelf somewhere. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it is amazing, really. I mean, here we have like the heart of what's at any kind of therapy change. Actually, change. A lot of artists use this. Actually, there are also business people who use it increasingly, and wherever you're looking for new thinking and creative thinking and change, you'll find the process of focusing. The reason it seems to be, the reason is because Gene Genlin, the grandfather of focusing, and an amazingly brilliant man, he was a bit of an iconoclast. He came out of Nazi Germany, a Jew, and his family, an immigrant out of Nazi Germany, Vienna, came to the US. And he was really opposed to systematizing anything, institutions. So focusing has always been very grassroots, which has been lovely, but it also means it's been really limited in getting out there. A lot of other institutes, they have they have standardized training programs, and they have good advertising, blah, blah, blah. But nothing like that with focusing.
Mm.
Jean was very much about it being for the people too. But anyone can use it. But anyway, the result of all that is it's only really just becoming, people are becoming aware of it now.
Mm.
It's sadly Jean passed away, and so it's being handled differently now, and also people are just waking up to it. So many people are realizing that focusing is at the core of what they're studying.
Yeah, this is it's certainly something. Once I came across it and started exploring it, and then I came and did some training with you, and it just astonished me that there's this incredible process, which also seems to fit beautifully with coaching as much as it does with therapy, like any change conversation.
Yes.
And you and I spoke about this as well, that there's, it's kind of jaw-dropping that it isn't everywhere in coaching.
I know. It's like, oh my God, there's this holy grail. There's this process. And the wonderful thing about focusing, it's a how-to. They're steps.
Right.
And really quite easy steps, actually, once you learn them, to be able to deepen this process for people. And and the beauty of it is it can be used with any modalities, whether it's coaching, whether it's psychotherapy, whatever kind of psychotherapy, analysis, behavioral, whether you're a body worker, it's an orientation to deepen whatever you do. And absolutely, for coaching, it's this kind of secret, hopefully not secret for too long, skill program with our program. And it's a how-to.
Yeah. It is a how-to, isn't it? I just wanted to kind of open the conversation a little bit, because I certainly want to come back to focusing, because it is our focus. But also, from what you've seen of the Emergent program so far, so we're kind of really developing this and expanding other areas. So there's these areas of sort of exploring myth and rich language and in notions of what is a self. What is this thing that is expressing itself, as a kind of energetic expression of me, or and even working with, say, the wild, and what is kind of touched in us deeply. And there seems to be a golden thread through all of these, which I see, and I'm just curious about your sense on this. What is also the broader notion of emergent coaching, how that fits with focusing and that approach.
Gosh, there's so much to say there. I mean, it's but because I've been, either attending your classes or catching up on the recordings, there is so much overlap in the way you've been helping to teach presencing, to be with the experience in the moment. You were doing a lot around the difference between thinking and feeling, or going to thinking and feeling, working with parts as well. So there's so much overlap here. And in terms of kind of more the as you say, the wild, the more metaphoric and the more poetic, focusing came out of a lot of research into what makes therapy work, how come some people move and some people don't, and that's how kind of focusing was discovered. It's the people who do move are doing this thing called focusing, and which is what our course is about, how, what that is and how to do that. But what they found was when people kept their experience in the moment of what they were talking about, they kind of slowed down and they tuned in and they listened to the felt experience, the kind of subtle felt experience of what they were talking about. That what came was unusual poetic language as they tried to articulate what was there. Images, metaphors, movement, and this kind of palpable, initially vague, it's not once you start to articulate it, it's actually very intricate, but initially vague kind of, oh, there's something there. That, there's more research to have shown that's actually this borderline, this area between conscious, regular conscious thinking, and just semi-conscious, the unconscious, or implicit and explicit. And that there's such different realms, there's such different universes, and they process so differently. But the common meeting ground is this palpable feeling sense.
Yeah.
That this is this zone between conscious and unconscious, just like border towns in Europe that are on the border of two different countries, different languages, but they speak both languages. That's kind of what this fuzzy zone is. And the common language that allows these two realms to communicate is unusual poetic language, metaphors and images, a kind of translation. So when we talk about something and we pause and we touch in there, what comes from the underneath is the next from our whole selves, and our unconscious selves process millions of times of data, millions of times quicker than our regular conscious selves that can only really do a few bits at a time. So when we lay out our issue, we go to this fuzzy edge and we wait and we open it in the kind of particular ways that we'll be teaching and talking about, like a whole packet, a whole next from this vast unconscious realm with so much wisdom that has left brain, right brain, thinking, feeling, body. It's got the all of us in it, which is why it's always so fresh and so new, and it carries our whole self forward. And so this is where it crosses with what you're talking about in terms of the wild, in terms of metaphor, in terms of unusual language. That this is this realm that translates what's coming from our larger selves and our implicit, the explicit, and into the issues that we're dealing with.
I'm really sensing myself how our conversation, in a sense, is coming alive as well for me. I'm really feeling this kind of tingling, this awakening inside me as something, becomes the interest, and the excitement kind of grows about what you're talking about here. I really, like, I felt it when you spoke about the unusual nature of the communication. The border towns. I love that image. Of this, like the French towns on the border of Switzerland and Germany, or something like that. And there was, you said about movement, because for me that's where I really, when I started coming into this work, it was awakening a part of me when I'd been a dancer, and I'd found that my way of embodying creativity, the way of sort of communicating out into the world that really brought me alive was through the body. And there was something that was very literal and direct about that. That there was, as you said, there was a feeling that was fuzzy, that needed to express itself. And it couldn't necessarily come out in words, though I love words.
Yes.
Sometimes it was another way.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's like the whole organism, your whole self,
right,
is expressing.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I'm imagining this isn't something that gets compartmentalized into your professional life as well, that what you're exploring here is a different way of being in the world.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for me, and I know for a number of other people who do this a lot, and some people who don't do it a lot, but just bringing in that awareness really changes your living in the world. Just in every way, just becoming far more sensitive to yourself and the levels in yourself, having a lot more access to the levels in yourself. Life becomes much more vivid too, in every way. I mean, my appreciation of art as well. I mean, this is just little bits. It's just like so different. It's like, whoa, and this is a really silly example, but I'm terrible at sports and any kind of anything I'm just terrible at. And I've got no coordination and I remember a while ago I played billiards. Is it billiards you call it?
Yeah.
And I'm just terrible. I've always been terrible at billiards. And I decided to play it with my felt sense.
Yeah.
I played my husband and his sister, who are pretty good at billiards, and I beat them. I mean, it sounds a silly example, but I'm not going to think about this. I'm just going to use my felt sense. And it's a silly example, but it's when it's because I was going with my whole self rather than my thinking self, which is very strong in me. But life is much richer.
I don't think that's a silly example at all. I think it's you just articulated beautifully how we can get in our own way, that we actually consciously have a story. I'm terrible at this. I can't do, which is probably some voice from somewhere, like some teachers or who knows, your peers when you're a kid and I have an example, which is when I learned to ski. And it was only about sort of 7 or 8 years ago or something. I was a dancer. You were often, it was really advised not to go and do winter sports like that. You could, that could be career ending. And I just never did after that. I was in Australia. We didn't have a lot of snow. And I went with my brother and his family up into the Italian Alps, and we had this instructor, and I remember doing all the instructions and conscious left this, do that, And there was a point after about a day where I thought, same as you, I'm going to trust my inner sense on this. I'm just going to trust, I'm going to think like water, and feel like water and just go down a slope, because water can go down a slope, and I just kind of let go. And I still fell over at times, but it was always when I got involved.
Right.
Oh, I got to stop, or I got to do this. When I was just letting it happen. Right. So I had the same experience where felt sense is a better guide for me.
Yes. And Rod, I just want to come in. Just like when I was speaking about the border towns, and there was an excitement in you. Again, like when you were talking about thinking like water, just something woke up in me. And this is the thing, when you evoke the implicit, it wakes up, it can hear.
And here we are. Just like in sessions, if you start to evoke the implicit in the other and speak from it in yourself, it perks up. It knows someone's listening. Yeah. So now we've both woken up. How about we talk a little bit about how we as the sort of facilitator can help set that up? Because there's something of us, isn't there, that needs to hold the kind of shape and the space and the energy that sets up the availability for the person who comes with you. What's your process? How do you do that? What's your experience on that?
Well, a few things there. One is that I come from a place of focusing when I'm with somebody. So I'm already listening from my own feeling sense. There might be like a third of me listening to the content.
Yeah.
2/3 of me, I'm tracking my own feeling sense, and because it's such a great guide in terms of knowing where the opening spots are, where the energy is trying to move forward. And I think someone can also sense when you're coming from that place. In terms of being with somebody, you're, as well as listening with your body, you're also listening for those felt sense words, where it's starting to peak up from people having their regular conversations with the things they want to address or whatever it is, and you can kind of feel the felt sense peaking up in those conversations, and it peaks up in when like an unusual language, languaging. Sometimes not even unusual languaging, just feeling words like, oh, blah, 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 I kind of felt sad about that, or blah, 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 disappointment, or blah, 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 excited, So you're looking for feeling words or imagistic words, visual words. You're also looking at the body. You're always is there a sigh? Is there a colouring up? Is there a slight tension? So you're listening to the body as well as the words, and looking for where the energy is changing, and then you're slowing down and you're kind of like reflecting that back resonantly, and you start asking into those places. So, and that automatically is letting this person's implicit know that there's someone listening for it, and then it starts to come more. So you're always navigating that kind of like, you're going up and down, thinking into feeling sense, and then thinking, you're doing the zigzag between the two, and the person doesn't usually know what you're doing. It's not like you can do it as an exercise and say, okay, now let's just check inside, but it's very easy to weave into conversations with people.
Yeah, what came up in this as well was, are there ever moments where you find a kind of, where next in when you're in relationship with someone, and how do you manage that if there is?
Yes, gosh, I mean, there are so many ways that can go. Blood of where next. Well, I'm always tracking people, so I've always got a handle, some kind of handle on what's going on.
Right, yeah.
And so maybe if you could give me an example there, like give me a little bit more.
Oh, just where the mind, a client's presented something, I'm trying to think of an example, because if they presented something where there's lots of avenues, there's always a where next. There's actually an abundance of where next. I guess it was bound out of the question that say trainee coaches often ask us, and it's around their I think it's around freezing, actually.
Yes.
I think it's around that.
Yes, well, there's a few things I'd say around that. If you freeze, it's often because the client is freezing.
Interesting.
And so we quickly go to, it's my fault. I'm a bad coach, or how come I don't know the next way? So one thing is just to take a breath there and say, okay, what is it? What is the client up against? And they're freezing in a particular kind of way that I'm kind of picking up. I'm in the energy field and I'm doing that too. So that can give you a handle to get away from the shame and the fright. Okay, I can take a breath here. This isn't because I'm a bad coach. It's because it's so that's one thing. Another thing, that there are several things in focusing which are really helpful. So, like, if one thing is always, you can always say to the client, when you say blah, 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 and you repeat back what seems to be the crux of what they're in, or there might be a couple of different things. There's a da-da-da and a da-da-da-da. What comes here about that?
Yeah. Great question.
And clients often say, usually clients get it. If they don't, they might say, what are you talking about? And you say, well, I'm just wondering, we all there's always something going on.
Right. Yeah.
does it feel a bit heavier, or does it
Yeah.
make you anxious, or I'm just wondering what comes here. And usually people can come up with something. That's always really helpful. Other classic focusing questions, they're always questions that mean the person has to stop and reflect. Can't do it from their head. So another wonderful way is saying, what's the worst of da 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 da? What's the worst of all of this?
Yeah.
Or what makes it so da 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 da? Like if they're feeling stuck and angry, what makes, out of all of that, like what makes it so panicky? What's the worst of it? That's a really helpful. There are a number of things like that.
Yeah.
So reflecting back the crux of all the stuff, and saying, okay, so what comes here? What's the worst of that? What makes it so? Another piece is that when someone's coming with an issue, there are invariably other voices inside saying no. And that's something Jean always used to say, let's hear from the opposition.
I love that.
Important, especially in coaching.
Great question.
Because I have these up here, ideas and agendas, stuff we want to do, and then down here it's got a it's got something different going on. That means we can't do what we consciously are setting out to do. And so focusing is wonderful for inviting the opposition. Like, so when we stay with that, just knowing that there's opposition, there's always opposition. There's always a conflict if someone's trying to move forward, even if they don't know what that is. So what comes there? What comes? There's a place inside that has got reservations about this, or there's a place inside that is there's something else going on. Like, let's just wonder what that is. What comes there? And people have amazing access. Actually, usually stuff starts popping up. One thing Jean said, which I've found over the years to be so true, is that every human experience, no matter how dysfunctional it may seem, has a positive life forward movement inherent in it. There's always a life forward movement trying to happen that at some point got thwarted, and it's kind of bent in on itself. It's doing something else. And is in the shadows somewhere. If we can call that forward, there's so much energy and so much gold in those places. And so focusing helps us to evoke the opposition, what's going on, and then keep that company, and then let that unfold and move forward in the way it needs to in a democracy. And then we as a whole.
I love that. Yeah, we as a democracy. Listening to both sides of the aisle. It's a good analogue for much of the world today.
Absolutely.
This is a beautiful way of just repositioning us into the joins of coaching and therapy, because you're saying, Jean's saying there's a sort of intrinsic and innate forward movement, within us. And, coaching, the simplistic model, we spoke a bit about this, that the simplistic model that's often applied is, well, therapy's, really a little more engaged in the past, and coaching is predominantly aimed at looking to the future. But there's a lot of nuance to this, and both are really trying to create a more ideal human. I just love us to explore a little of this, that though we're all forward focused, where might a coach say step away and hand it to a therapist? So one thing I can think of we spoke about is that we're not trauma trained.
Yes, that's very true. Yes, I think one of the differences between therapy and coaching, although I do think there is quite a bit of overlap, particularly when you get into the realm of focusing. As a coach, you might be working on something. Hearing from the opposition could be a stuck place from the past. that you don't have to do a whole big piece of work on. It just needs to be heard and connections made. Oh, this is like this. That's why, to help the energy move forward. So there is an overlap. But therapy, in psychotherapy, what you're signing on for is it's very relational, and coaching is obviously very relational too. But you're signing on for a whole new relational experience, sometimes more long term with a therapist. You're engaging. You're making an inner and outer relationship with your client to have a whole new living and relational experience. Whereas, coaching is more practical in the sense that you're defining goals, and obviously you're working relationally, but it's a slightly different orientation. Although obviously working on goals comes up in therapy. So yes, so when a client's really overwhelmed, when a client's overwhelmed, like past trauma coming up, which a therapist working in this more long-term relational way, you're creating a different relationship for that trauma to be able to emerge and heal, which is not your goal so much in coaching. So when someone's getting overwhelmed, you can tell like there's an old trauma coming up. That would be a time to maybe it's a good idea for you to see a therapist to maybe work alongside each other.
Well, you and I have worked alongside each other with a client.
Yes.
Right? And my role was very short term, that it was a specific project. But whereas, it just sort of supplemented.
It worked so well too. It worked so well.
Yeah. And I was thinking about, these signs that we get. I mean, I know I see certain signs in, like you said, overwhelm. If I see people kind of regressing, like when something comes up, they close their eyes and they kind of go back, or they're just constantly crying, or, if there's indicators of depression, I might refer out,
Yes.
Because there could be, there could even be chemical reasons for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I remember, even in my own experience, I remember I had unprocessed stuff around my father's death, which was very sudden and very tragic and very traumatic for me at the time. And I just had done the young boy thing at the time of kind of just tamp it down. And it was only later, when every time a therapist would ask me about it, I'd burst into tears. That, it's not as though it's still not here, but it was just so alive that was a sign that there was process work to do with the therapist for me.
Right. That was a very important, deep place to really get some amen.
I actually had never grieved. That's what had happened, and I just hadn't let go. But we're trained into being stoic, some of us, about this, just chin up and let's get on with it,
that you did that you gave that to yourself was so important, because you as a coach, it's also important to work on yourself to be able to have more of all of you. To be able to work with people.
And just on this topic as well, at the same time, we try to train our coaches not to be afraid when emotions come up, or it's something connected to the past. Just because we're in that area as coaches, it doesn't mean we're being a therapist. That a client comes with a whole context.
Yes, and I think that's such an important thing. Because, for instance, I was working with a client who is trying to move forward with her business, and she has a lot of fear. And when we opened that up, what came up was a fear around. She realized it was like a rocky pass that she had to get over. There was a lot of shame. If she was going to get through that rocky pass, she was going to fall in. She was going to stumble. She was going to look stupid in her eyes. And that was really inhibiting her, and it was touching off on childhood stuff about not wanting to take up too much space, not being visible. And just, again, we didn't have to do a whole piece on it, but just that realization is, oh, that's what that is. You know, oh, I can hold my own hand through that, actually. Yeah, oh, it's okay if I stumble and fall. That's regular. So that was a little bit of past work done around moving forward in the present.
Yeah.
And you don't have to, as a coach, just being able to open it up a bit in the session can be really helpful.
Yeah.
As you say, it's not something to stay away from that, or it'll come up quite naturally.
Do you find there's a kind of training that clients go when they work with us, because they don't really come with the depth of understanding, and there's a sort of gentle entrainment that we engage in as they gradually get their hand on what we're actually doing here and they become more proficient?
Yes.
Yeah. So can you talk a little about, your experience around that, how you manage that, how you entrain a client into that?
Yes. Well, actually, I mean, some clients just do it very naturally as we're exploring things, and I'll ask what comes here, or I'll do my focusing engagement, and it's very kind of natural, so it's not necessary. I have other people who come and say, well, how do you work? What is it that you do?
Right. Yeah.
And absolutely, I give them a little, and it depends on the person. I tailor it to what I have a sense of the person's language and how they hear things and how they experience things, their meaning, their world meaning. I might talk about it as, I might say a little bit about the research. That research shows that in this way, actually, this really, it changes all levels of you.
Yeah.
When you just talk about something, things don't really change. When you emote in a cyclical way, the same angry, that doesn't work. But when you kind of sense into this fuzzy zone and find the right distance and relate and symbolize that experience, unusual words, metaphors, that's what moves the whole organism, the whole of you forward.
Right.
And you tap into this implicit underneath.
Yeah.
I talk about it in terms of, so we connect, we're helping head and heart and feelings to be on the same page, because in so many of us, we're just disconnected. There's no dialogue.
Right. Yeah.
And health is the aliveness and coherence of this link.
Yeah.
So it depends, and people get it, and I'll just alter my languaging if they're not, to where they are.
Yeah.
Conscious, unconscious. Well, actually, Jean didn't like those terms.
Yeah.
Explicit.
Yeah.
Right brain, thinking, feeling, mind, body. However, whatever to people, it's the same thing.
Same thing, really, isn't it? I know. I love the way that you feel the same with that. Because, now when we look at where cognitive science is going, and say the work of linguists like Lakoff and Johnson, who are finding these things, such as the way the implicit, or the unconscious, they call it, speaks, is in these imagistic, kind of unusual ways, and that the current estimates of the embodied process being 95%, of our whole process, that, Jean was just so far ahead of the curve.
So far ahead.
Yeah. And no wonder people couldn't quite get it. And yet I know in my Buddhist tradition, and we've spoken about this a lot, I mean, hundreds of the practitioners and senior teachers have had training in focusing. My wife is in a Dharma teacher training at the moment with a senior teacher, and one of our guiding teachers in our local group, and she's a focusing trained therapist.
So yeah,
right? Because the joins are not distinct for the kind of work we all do. It's the same material, and this material's been known in contemplative traditions for as long as we humans have been around, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the emphasis, it depends. Absolutely, there's
True.
so much
It does depend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm so with you there. There's so much overlap. Then there are some nuances that are different.
Indeed, there are.
Similar. And it depends on the discipline and the practice. Focusing does have its own discrete
absolutely
thing.
Yeah.
But in essence, there's so much overlap in the presencing and the keeping company and
it is absolutely true that they're not exact by any means, and that's certainly often spoken about in the Buddhist traditions. That hey, we're not doing vipassana, for example, but actually you're kind of going through a different door to the same thing. And this is another. It's so closely aligned, which is why I think so many Buddhist practitioners are drawn to it as a more accessible way, particularly for people who want to work in inquiry with clients or others who don't have the training. It offers a really effective pathway for them to engage with.
Right. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So I've just got an eye on the clock for us because I know we need to draw our conversation to a close. I'm really feeling I feel so connected. I know we always, often just sitting, even outside of a recorded conversation, just find so much to talk about. I just love the connection and feel so appreciative that we're going to be exploring this incredible work with you in the next phase of the coach training program.
Me too.
Yeah.
Excited about it, and it just, we're so much on the same page. It really feels like such play too.
Yeah.
It's really, really fun.
Right. Yeah. So thank you for today, Charlotte. Thank you for your
my
time.
pleasure.